The fervently pro-EU politician suggested European countries in the future will only be able to exercise self-control through the European Union. Mr. Gabriel claimed even Germany, the EU's largest and strongest financial contributor, would have to accept more EU rules in the coming years. He said in the world of the 21st century, Europe will only be able to act on a sovereign basis via the European Union, by winning back sovereignty through the European Union. Getty EBSEU News. Sigmar Gabriel said European countries will have to accept more EU controlEven. Germany, big and strong as it is, in tomorrow's world will not have a voice by itself. Our children and her children will have the choice of having no voice to be heard or a common European voice. He had been speaking at a conference detailing the next 7-year budget of the EU, following speeches by EU Commissioner Jean-Claude Juncker and European Commission Budget Günther Oettinger. Explaining his vision, Mr. Gabriel called for further integration between EU member states to better defend the interests of their citizens and further stabilize the European Union. He said there is no loss of sovereignty by being part of the European Union. There may be a loss of sovereignty when it comes to shaping life in Europe if we did not have a European Union and if nation-states by themselves had to defend the interests of their population. Mr. Gabriel's plans for the future of the European institutions falls in line with the proposals Mr. Juncker presented during his State of the Union speech in September 2017. The Brussels boss called for EU integration in the face of rising populism after Britain voted to sever ties with the bloc ahead of crunch elections in Italy, Sweden, Hungary and the Czech Republic, where Eurosceptic parties are gaining momentum. In his address, Mr. Juncker said sweeping changes to the EU institutions, which would also include electing MEPs on a European basis from 2019, could be achieved without treaty change. He laid out ambitious plans for measures he said could be achieved without changing the bloc's fundamental charter, something that would spark referenda in a large number of member states. These included taking more decisions on joint foreign policy by a majority vote, rather than unanimity, and setting up a European Monetary Fund complete with the Eurozone Finance Ministry and Minister. Wednesday, July 26, 2017. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker greets EU Commission Chief Spokesperson Margaritis Schiene as the move towards a so-called United States of Europe would also create yet more bureaucracy, with the creation of a new EU electoral authority which would regulate the electoral lists. Guy Verhofstadt, the Brexit coordinator for the European Parliament and leading critic of Britain's decision to leave the EU, welcomed Mr. Juncker's plans with excitement. The Belgian MEP pledged his support to the EU Commissioner's federalist plans to integrate Brussels law further into the socio-economic frameworks of member states. Mr. Verhofstadt said, "I have to confess something, that each time I have heard these proposals, the State of the Union, your agenda, I felt an excitement. But the proposals are causing nervousness in some wealthier member states who fear being dragged into debt pooling but form a key plank of federalists' proposed reform of the Eurozone."